All right, so now I want to bring it over to the MVP race, which I'm so hung up on. Usually by this point in the NBA season, the player who's going to win the award is kind of all but certain. Maybe not like consensus, 100% lock, but overwhelmingly the vibes are kind of towards one person. You kind of know who it's going to go to. And this regular season, however, being only a few days really from being completed, and yet I have no goddamn idea who I think should win it. It does appear as though the race has boiled down to Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic. SGA and Giannis are pretty universally in those 3 and 4 slots. Obviously Brunson's been kind of working his way into that, but for most people, I don't know if they're really on that timing quite yet. But SGA and Giannis are pretty universally in those like next spots, but there does seem to be a bit of a general understanding that they're not quite in the running to the same extent. And I think they absolutely both deserve a seat at this table in this conversation. But I would agree their cases aren't quite as strong as Jokic or Luka's. OKC's success this season has been remarkable, but I do think it has a bit more to do with an overall team effort. And this is kind of what I was saying a bit earlier, but this is by no means slander against SGA or how elite he has been this season and last season. But Jalen Williams took a unforeseen second-year growth, at least for a lot of people I know. Maybe not like OKC Thunder fans or whatever, but legit one of the clutchest players in the league, a bona fide scorer and playmaker. He's big time. He's big time as a second year player, big time. I think definitively you can be like, oh, okay, this is a championship level second option in a couple of years. Like, we don't need to worry about like this team being a piece away, like another star player away. They have multiple guys who are developing into stars actively. Chet Holmgren, also, not perfect, but basically the ideal modern 5, if you think about it. I mean, the way he can stretch the floor, shoot the ball at an elite efficiency, specifically from 3, but also he's a pretty good mid-range shooter, I believe. Defends at a high level, obviously a great rim protector. He is, slim and slender, but still just incredible defensive instincts, timing, and length. He's got like a 7.5-foot wingspan or something like that. And he's not as like weak as he might, look. And he's tied second in the league. It's like a 4-way tie, but tied second in the league for blocks per game. As a rookie, incredible. Only really being eclipsed by Victor Wembanyama, which is its own conversation we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, he's been ridiculous. OKC also has Isaiah Joe, who's been one of the best shooters in the game this season. Cason Wallace, who's been an elite 3-and-D guard for a rookie especially, and who has also flashed some playmaking potential as well. Just, it's ridiculous. They got a stud here, a stud here. There's studs all over this roster. Again, I don't think any of this should take away from Shea and how good he is as a player, himself. OKC is way ahead of schedule, and he is leading that charge, no doubt. But as far as most valuable player, I do think there's a couple of dudes who mean a bit more to their team's success. As for Giannis, he's having a career year offensively, 30.5 points or something like that on 61% from the field is just ridiculous. Also, the Bucks have been a roller coaster this season, kind of a shit show at times. Switching head coaches in the middle of a season for Doc Rivers of all people at that. He's held that ship down, no question. I think if the Cavs and the Knicks and the Sixers were more healthy throughout this season, the Bucks being the 2 seed would be a bit more impressive. But in reality, through all of this chaos, even still, I feel like the 2nd seed in this conference is still kind of like the floor for this team. You have Giannis, who's at worst a top 3 player in the NBA, and Damian Lillard. And that's just sort of a recipe for a bunch of regular season wins. So, in combination with a fair bit of their conference competition being weakened to some extent for a good portion of the season, it's just not the same kind of regular season success akin to like a top 4 to 5 seed in the West this year. Which means I'm utterly, helplessly torn between Nikola Jokic and Luka Doncic. I mean, I know I brought up Jalen Brunson in the past, in the previous segment, and I do truly think he has worked his way into having a serious MVP case, not just like a, hey man, let's shout out this dude balling out. No, like if you think about it and his value to a team that is having a really, really good success. I mean, look, 48 and 32 doesn't carry the same kind of weight in the West, but that still would be a 6 seed. I think he deserves to be in this conversation, and in fairness, I guess he's kind of only crept into this conversation because of the stretch he's been on. I think more recently, and also like. I mean, we just know Jalen Brunson isn't going to win the 2024 NBA MVP award, so, like, I don't know how much utility there is in, like, continuing to seriously talk about it. I mean, I feel like I got to do my part as a Knicks fan to elevate that conversation and elevate Jalen and platform the way he's been balling out, but, like, I guess it's, like, a little too late, / like, the Knicks just haven't been, like, I guess, quite as good in the comparison to the whole league overall. If you were to make it a conference list NBA, they would be a top 10 team, but, not like a top 4 team or something like that. And, I guess that's fair. And yeah, as I said, I mean, he's been playing more recently like legit a top 10, top 9, top 8 player, but that hasn't been for the entire season. So, yeah. Granted, I need to put this out there. He's averaging 30 points and 7 assists in the past 4 months. 31.5 points and 7 assists in the past 3 months. And 31 and 7 in the past 2 months. More people need to be talking about that. Jalen Brunson is so goddamn good. And for 4 out of 6 months of this NBA season, he's been averaging 30 and 7. Which is basically the same stuff as Shea, all right? So, again, this is not like a comparison, but just, think about the way Shea is talked about. And obviously he's in fairness, a much tougher conference. And I think that's a big point to this. But I just want more people talking about the fact that he's legitimately been 30 and 7 for the past 4 months, which is insane. But yeah, as I was saying, it's not quite on the same level as like Jokic or Luka's seasons as a whole. So I'll concede, I suppose. Although seriously, I meant it when I said it. The Knicks probably need him more than Denver need the Joker, and more than the Mavs need Luka. But I feel like that'll fall on deaf ears anyways. And then, as I was saying with the Shea thing, like, they are in a notably tougher conference, so who's really to say? Honestly, it's kind of hard to, you can't really do a comparison like that when you rip a team who's playing in a tougher conference, and like switch a player. Yeah, anyways, back to Jokic and Luka and the two-man race that we kind of have here. A lot of people, including a lot of members of the media, think Jokic kind of has this award like in the bag, or is clearly the one who deserves it, and I don't know. I'm just like not so sure it's that simple. Jokic has the better record, the better on-off numbers, meaning he's essentially making his team better when he's playing than Luka, but I don't think that tells the full picture. His situation, the Denver Nuggets, have also had a lot more consistency, more availability from his teammates, and while I don't think that detracts from Nikola Jokic and how good he is as an actual basketball player, I think it is fair to factor that in to the value you bring to your team's success in a given season. As for Luka, he has the better numbers. I mean, both are averaging ridiculous numbers. Nikola Jokic is averaging like 26.6 points, 12.5, maybe even 13 rebounds, 9 assists on your usual transcendent efficiency. But, Luka's 34, 10 and 9. That's just like that's unreal even by unreal standards. So that's his. I mean, that's the Embiid stat line from when we were like, oh, he has the MVP locked up already, and it's literally 25 games in. In fact, he's averaging like more assists than that. Anyways, additionally, he's had the more turbulent season and team setting in contrast to Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets. The Mavs' most used lineup only recently overtook their previously most used lineup that involved Grant Williams, who hasn't been on the roster for months. In fact, that lineup has played 377 possessions together, while the Nuggets' most used lineup has played 1,831 possessions together. That's nearly 5 or 6 times the amount that they've had together. Again, that does not detract from Jokic as a player, but in terms of like a value to how your team's season went, I think that's fair to involve. And so you got to think that like that lack of consistency that Luka and the Mavs have had, that translates to his production and his level of ridiculous consistency being like inherently more valuable to his team's success, right? I mean, I am kind of just throwing that out there as a question. I'm genuinely curious. I have none of this is like I told you. I'm lost. I don't know who to vote for. Also, the on-off thing, I don't think tells the full picture because I think it has a lot more to do with the pace that the Mavs play at when Luka is on the floor. He obviously slows down the game a lot. He has a lot of isolation possessions. And it is fair criticism of Luka that he doesn't move much off ball. He definitely needs to get better at that. But obviously the Mavs are better when Luka is on the court. To say that is not the case would just be idiotic. And obviously when he's on the court, you want the ball in his hands. So if it ISOs and it slows down the pace and what you can, I guess, overall generate in terms of points per like 100 possessions, you'd still rather have Luka Doncic with the ball. You know those possessions are going to be infinitely more valuable and will, per possession, generate better looks when it's coming off of him. And so I think that needs to be noted. Also, he has Kyrie Irving. And, I love Jamal Murray. I think he's a bit underrated. It's kind of similar to the Jimmy Butler thing where like they're just clearly not taking it as seriously in the regular season. Although I think the difference is everyone talks about that for Jimmy, and I don't know. There's a lot of people who I feel like even come playoff times don't rate Jamal Murray as high as they probably should. 30-point triple-doubles in the finals. So yeah, I think he's a little bit underrated, but I think it's fair to say he's not Kyrie. And so I think also some of that on and off stuff has to do with the fact that Luka has a elite guard who can also just up his offensive load when he's sitting and, keep that pace going along. So it's not like it's not like it falls off a cliff when he sits or something like that. Which you can also add to like, hey, can he be the MVP with that? So I don't know. I guess the question to me is, what are the margins this race comes down to? Is it the difference in winning? Is it the difference in just like raw box score numbers, statistical production? Is it who does or doesn't have that all-star, all-NBA level co-star? I don't know. If it means anything, as I said, Jokic is the better player. I don't know if I said that actually, but Jokic is the better player. He is the better, more valuable defender. He plays more within the flow of the game and is more impactful off ball. And I see a lot of people using the fact that Jokic is a better player as like a reason for when describing why he should be the MVP. But I don't know, man. The MVP award isn't about who's the best player in the world, or at least it shouldn't be, because if it was, LeBron would have a lot more, MJ would have a lot more, Kobe would have a lot more, Shaq would have more, Jokic even would have won last season, voter fatigue wouldn't be a thing. So I don't know. I just don't think it's a great reason for why he shouldn't be or should be the MVP. That he's the best player in the world, because it's like, okay, but the best doesn't necessarily mean value if the best is on a better team or a more consistent, stable setting. Again, it doesn't take away from his actual skill, but this is a very specific context needed award. So yeah, I think you could argue Luka's the better, more versatile scorer. I think you could maybe give that over Jokic, but that's like one thing, and sort of like, for whatever it's worth, if that's your sort of thing. But yeah, I'm stuck between a rock and a hard place with this one. I don't think you're going wrong either way, but every time I'm like, oh, it should be Jokic. I'm like, but Luka. And every time I'm like, yeah, no, I think it's Luka. I'm like, but Jokic. It's pretty crazy. I genuinely have no idea who I think should win it. And especially with the Mavs being red hot recently, finally making up some serious ground in the standings. For all the changes and injuries that this team has dealt with throughout this season, they only have 6 less wins than the Nuggets. And in an 82-game season, that's pretty negligible, honestly. Some might not agree with me on that and think that like 6 games is a drastic margin, but I really don't think it is. And it's probably going to end up being at like that 5 or 6 game difference. And I don't know, like one of these two teams had a like borderline roster like reconstruction halfway through, so. On one hand, they got better, so it's like you can't say it was like they got worse or something, but at the same time, there's a huge buffer period that's usually needed when you bring in new players that are fundamentally changing the way you play the game. And the fact that they just immediately, like, they made those trades, spent like 10 games kind of figuring it out, and then immediately just got to it and started soaring, all while Luka is just doing this 35 points, 10 rebounds, 9.5 assists, whatever. Like, I don't know, man. That's some generational shit right there. I have no clue who I would vote for if I had a vote, that is. I'm just going to wait until the regular season's over and then use my gut instinct / a vibes-based voting system. I'm going to do like a Hoops Hour end of season awards show in a couple of episodes, so I'm just going to put it off till then, a problem for future me to deal with, and hope maybe I have a bit more clarity when the season is like fully over and whatnot. But yeah, it's been a historic MVP race, and this is all after the clear favorite injured his meniscus 34 games in and took himself out of the conversation, so crazy stuff, really.